first. Okay, everyone, I'd just like to introduce you to Dwayne. Dwayne is going to be taking over the Diploma of Alcohol and Other Drugs classroom sessions. So on the Wednesday, he will be starting next week and taking these sessions. Dwayne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, okay, looking forward to it. Even if you think I'm stupid, just I'm really excited about it. I was a high school teacher for 10 years in the UK, and then I came over here and somebody said, while you're waiting for a job, why not? There's a drug and alcohol rehab that they're looking for workers. And I'd worked in a couple of in high schools about 2 or 3 years. And I said, no way, no, why would I honestly want to do that? And eventually, within a couple of months, I decided to go for the job, and I was there 8 years because it was fantastic. It was my favorite job ever. Yeah, so loved teaching and loved working in the community sector, especially that area. So it was great. And that's 20 years. 20 years goes like that, doesn't it?
It does.
So how do we say your name? Dwayne.
Dwayne.
Dwayne. Okay.
Yeah.
Dwayne.
Cheers. Good to meet everybody.
Whereabouts in the UK are you from?
Right up north, near Scotland. Durham.
Okay.
Really.
There's a few people that may know exactly where you lived.
Cool.
Seem to be a few that have been over there or that have come.
I was in the UK last year, yeah. England and Ireland we didn't get to Scotland, unfortunately.
I guess I have to say that the UK is a great place to be from. Well,
I'm just answering a message. All right, and once we've done that, we will start. Okay, so let me pop the screen up. Okay. So we're on the third session of Work with Diverse People, which is the last session. And what we will do at the end of the session is have a little chat about the assessments and what's required as well. Okay, would anyone like to do the acknowledgement to country? Yeah.
I will.
Thanks,
Yep.
Liz.
All right. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nations people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. All right, and I'll just do this for Dwayne's benefit. So we just have a reminder of our rules and groups, and I'll just go through it. So we break at 7 for 10 minutes and then 8 for 10 minutes. I have a really bad habit of forgetting or getting caught up, so I ask that the participants remind me if I'm going over time. No smoking or vaping while we're on, which is why the lovely Paul ducked out for us. We do say cameras on. If people are wanting to eat, if they've got other people in the background, or if they are just needing to have it off, that's perfectly fine. Microphones we put on mute, and I mute people if people don't realise that there's something in the background, like Was it you, Phil, that have a lovely dog? You've got a little puppy, or did you have a puppy one time? Or no, it must have been a different other class. There was somebody that had a beautiful puppy that kept coming in, and I had to keep muting them because the dog was really excited. It's put hands up if we have someone that really wants to make a point. And that's easier to do in this class because there's not too many people. In my other class where I have 35, I don't see the hand up. So that's a real issue. We just need to be mindful of how we talk to each other, and also be mindful, so with the trigger warning as well, that this is being recorded. So our conversations when we are talking and developing an understanding of the topic are really important. But sometimes it's do we need to think about why we're sharing it, and can we just make it not a personal example, but a general example? So that's something I got out of my new session this week with Mental Health First Aid. Basically, they were saying, like, ask people why are you needing to share that story, which was really interesting. And then making sure that we're kind to ourselves. So I would prefer people to text me in the chat if they don't want to talk, or if they don't want to be called on, if they just need it a little bit softer today, just so that we can see where people are at and make sure that we're not overstepping and making it more difficult. And be kind to yourself is super, super important for people doing this course, working and trying to do assessments, because that is definitely something that people are very, very hard on themselves, because so many of you have kept mentioning that you're behind and that you're overdue, and it stresses you. So we need to just go, you know what, just put that to the side. You'll get to it. You'll do it. You've got that. A little bit of anxiety is good, because and this is also what I learned this week, it'll keep you alive, but too much is no good. So don't stress yourself out. All right. I don't think I've broken that down as much previously, but all good. All right. So today's session, we are looking at ethics, law, codes of practice, anti-discrimination and diversity, and those indicators. So pretty much the sessions are a 25%, they're an add-on. It's about a community of practice. It's about bringing some conversations and opening up some of the concepts, rather than an absolute run through of all of the information, because it's not possible in the timeframes that we have. That information is sitting in the learner guide, and that will support you. There's more information, there's more links, there's more videos. So that's where the majority of the information will be found, plus your own research when you're looking for answers in the assessments. All right, now to start it, can you please research what is the Australian Community Workers Association code of, now I can't read all of it because I've got it, code of ethics and practice. So we're looking for the diversity aspect of that. Pudding. You've got something.
Is it an explicit document that lays down the expectations of a professional working in the field? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Did anyone else find a bit of information about it? If you weren't able to find the actual Australian Community Workers Association, if you find any other organisation's code of ethics with a diversity clause, that'll be a good too. Yep, Liz, what did you grab?
I'm not sure if this is it, but it's got the community worker is therefore expected to acknowledge and respect the worth of all individuals, regardless of their race, religion, age, gender, sexual and gender diversity, and other individual differences. So I'm not sure if that's the actual standards, the Aqua Code of Ethics page, but yeah.
Yeah. And the idea is to become familiar with codes of ethics and guidelines within a policy. So each organisation is going to have a code of conduct. Overarching, there might be a framework, an association, a code that you're complying with, and it's being able to identify, well, where would it be for me in the industry or the organisation that I'm working in, and how do I access it, and what does it mean for me? So just on those two snippets that you and Pierre read, like what does it tell you about how you should be working?
That everyone's equal.
Yeah.
Yeah, what, in a professional manner? What do you mean? Or in a manner of...
You don't discriminate. Treat everyone the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're spelling it out, aren't we? Like this is here for you to read. This is something you're given when you are orientated and inducted into a workplace. And if you don't comply, there are some consequences. So we need to be quite clear and spell that out for employees, as well as have an expectation that ethically you would work in this way. We need to have something to back that up. Does anyone else have anything to share on that?
Yeah, Donna, I was confused initially about because there's a standards, and there's a code of practice as well, isn't there? There's two governing bodies that govern the community service sector and welfare. So, do you know the difference between the two? Like, they're pretty similar, aren't they?
Yeah, and I'd have to do a bit of research to say, okay, because when you look at an industry, that industry and its context may draw their framework from a separate place. So say the aged care industry, like basically working in aged care in a facility or in home care, it's a community service. It's a community service organisation. But if you looked at it, you wouldn't expect it to be working under the Australian Community Workers Association Code of Ethics. It would come under the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, and it would have the standards of practice
That's right.
So that's where we follow. But literally you could go, well, this applies too. So the idea is that you may have a different work context, that this framework or this regulatory body is actually who we're complying with. This is where we obtain our practice standards or our code of ethics from. So if you think about NDIS, they're community service workers as well, but they've got the NDIS and the NDIA and their standards of practice and their code of ethics there as well. So you may find that your organisation, depending on where it sits, may take it from here, or they may take it from a more health-driven perspective.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, Liz, everybody in the workplace has the right to be treated fairly and the responsibility to treat others fairly, and these are mutual obligations. So we very often think about our clients, and we talk about our clients, and that's a massive focus that we have. Maybe sometimes not so much focusing on our colleagues, and we need to do that as well. we also have that responsibility that when we are working, that those mutual obligations are a responsibility that everybody else is upholding that. So if you see something, you can't just walk past. So it's about whether it's a client or whether it's another colleague. We can't just let that sit. That equal and fair practice, that cultural safety should be there for everybody. And we have a responsibility to ensure that that is the case. So our employers have also got their own responsibilities in this space. And so we're making sure that they are providing that environment. And what's our remedy? What can we do if your employer isn't providing that safe work environment?
Work safe.
Yeah, so there are a number of avenues, WorkSafe being one of them. We talked about that. Oh, did we talk about it or? Yeah, no, we talked about it in the managed personal stresses.
EAP run.
Yeah, the EAP. So, like that psychological harm, that they've got a responsibility to reduce or eliminate or reduce as much as practical the psychological harm that you may be exposed to. And that's not just about the client load or the work load that you do. It's also about, this kind of inequitable or culturally unsafe environment that might occur. What about on the client side? The client responsibility. How do we manage that? Yeah, Paul?
Just got a question about that, about the employers, sorry, before you went on.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that if the person, the employee or the worker in the actual organisation, whatever that might be, NDIS or down my way, gateways, etc., if one of the employees suffers an injury through this, a failure of the code of ethics to be enforced or practiced properly,
yep,
is that also iatrogenic pain and injury to them? Or is that only applied to clients, iatrogenic pain?
No, it would be to them as well.
Because it's still an injury from the mental health service.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's been a lot of more recently, there's been a lot of work around what the employer should put in place and what constitutes harm. It's not an easy one. Like sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's not so easy to identify and quantify. And that's when you get the stress leave and the bad reputation that stress leave has. But it is a difficult one. It's sometimes not as clear cut. You break your leg, you break your leg. You need reasonable adjustments to come back to work, all those things. When it comes to psychological harm and mental health problems, that's very much more complex, much more complicated, much less understood by the employer, better than it was. But I'm not going to say it's simple because it's not.
No.
Yeah. All right. So what about our clients and their responsibility? Any comments there?
You don't have to be treated like shit and just cop it.
You don't.
I don't know. I don't mean to be crude, but that's,
Yeah.
That's the guts of it.
That is the guts of it. Yeah, Liz?
Yeah, well, from a nursing point of view, doesn't really happen.
Mm.
Yes, it does. Well, we get abused all the time. And like even yesterday, a resident was abusing us, and we just got to say, can you please not speak to us this way? You know, it is not tolerated. And there's signs everywhere now about abuse. I mean, there's a whole thing in the medical profession about abuse, and, you know, happens to AMBOs, police, nurses. Like, it's not tolerated, but it doesn't stop them.
No, no. And it's like, it's not tolerated. It shouldn't happen. There are procedures and processes, but we collectively and the employer need to actually be mindful that we follow those processes that are there, and they don't. That's part of the problem. People will accept, downplay, you might grumble about it, you might say it was their health, it was this, it was that, whatever. And it may very well be, but there needs to be a real process around what do we do when it happens. And for some organisations, they've got a really good set of guidelines and policies and procedures around it, and they follow them. For others, not so much. So absolutely, it's their responsibility. Absolutely, it's part of the service agreements. When you come in, it's usually given to them in a handout. And after any incidents, those discussions are held again. Ultimately, some services will decide that they're not going to accept or continue to have that client in their service. And that will happen. It depends, like, you know, if you think about ICU or ED, they're not kicking those people out. But their management has to be much more forceful. And there are ways that they do manage it, often after an event though, not preemptively. Yeah. And unfortunately, after the event, the aftermath is often has been quite difficult and unpleasant, and physically there's been an injury. So that's always not a good thing. So preemptively, we're trying to set up, this is your responsibility. It doesn't always work. Yeah. All right, so let me just stop the share so I can optimize the sound. I did look at this video clip, and it's not a bad video. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, when you see the universal of the creation of human rights in its truest form, like when you see it in front of you, you just realise how many countries are breaking it, and how many countries aren't respecting it. I suppose that's what would have brought up for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, and I never knew Eleanor Roosevelt was on that committee, the drafting committee, when she says close to home, if we don't get it right close to home, how can we expect the larger world to get it right? Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I got one.
Mm-hmm.
We're a very multicultural country. Unfortunately, we're seen as very racist in a lot of ways, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think we are as bad as people think or say that we are. But with multiculturalism comes issues that Phil just raised in relation to this Declaration of Human Rights. Because some of the people that migrate, obviously, to Australia and are from backgrounds where, unfortunately, some women's rights are not seen as important as men's rights, some communities do tend to continue that when they come here. Now, that's not because they're at fault, it's because that's the way they've been educated and raised. And I don't say that that's something they're doing wrong, but I had no idea that the Declaration of Human Rights was written in 1937.
Mm.
I would have thought it would have been someone along the lines of Abraham Lincoln back in the end of slavery days.
Yeah, yeah.
I would never have thought it was written within the last 100 years.
It's surprising, like when you start to look at some of this, the changes, the political changes, the social changes that have come through. There's been far more progress in the last, say, 50 years than you would really expect. And we had that conversation last week about in Australia and the changes in the 60s and what happened, and we, you know, we thought that was much earlier than the 60s. So in real terms, it's not been that fast. This kind of belief about human rights isn't that old. And we will definitely be working with people that come from other places where their country is not a signatory. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, just to take it one step further, I guess. It was only 4 years ago, I think, was it? 4 years ago we voted on same-sex marriage.
Mm. 4 years ago.
Sorry?
4 years ago.
So 63 years after the Declaration said that sexual orientation was not a preclusion to community and society and rights, but took 63 years to go ahead in Australia and do something about it.
And we think we're quite grown up, that we're progressive, that we're contemporary, that we're a modern country.
Mm.
Mm. It's interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Sad.
Sad,
But positive, because we are moving. We are making changes. There is always hope. We have these systems in place. So has anyone researched or had a bit of a look at the Australian Human Rights Commission? You're maybe just have a quick look at some point and just become aware of what they do and what they can do for people in Australia. Don't have to do a big research thing now. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, sadly, it was in 1986 that it was established and renamed in 2008. But again, it was in 1986. It took us, you know, the best part of 34 years to decide on an equal and even society.
Yeah, and that we needed our own body.
Mm.
Yeah, but from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, what there are globally as well is they then developed charters or declarations, depending on the title of it, for people with mental health, for people with disabilities. And Australia was much, much quicker to sign on immediately once those were ratified. So that is also another positive thing, that we definitely jumped on board a lot quicker with the other charters and declarations that are coming out. All right. Okay, so then we're looking at needs and rights. And they always like, when we're doing units like this, they always like you to be able to understand the difference between a need and a right, and where those protections lie for people as well. So just being aware of what it is, and that the government and community services is in that space of ensuring that everybody's needs and rights are actually fulfilled, so that we can ensure that society as a whole and that communities and individuals can succeed and can participate fully in our society. All right, so then we're looking at discrimination. And most of us would have a fairly good understanding of what it is. And if you were asked to give me a definition in your own words, you would be able to identify those things that make up what discrimination looks like. In the workspace, what is your responsibility if you feel that that's occurring? So where are your avenues?
Like talk to the boss, what do you mean, or go to HR, or?
Yeah. So in your first instance, what I would encourage people to do is actually speak to the person themselves to get a really good picture of what else is happening. It may not be, you may just be seeing the tip of an iceberg. So if you're seeing that, what else has been happening? How long's it been going on for? What have they done? And making sure that, again, thinking about, we're about empowering people. So do they just need a little bit of support, your support, to take this further? Why might they not take it any further?
Fear,
Yeah, fear of what? What are they particularly?
retribution in the workplace.
Losing your job, really.
What was that, Pierre?
What, fear of losing your job or something, or?
Yeah, so if it's a client, it could be about retribution from the other workers or not having the service that they expect, that kind of thing. From a co-worker, it's about the other co-workers then excluding them, or the retribution from the workplace, managers coming down harder on them, things like that. So there are reasons why people won't say anything at all. Obviously, it is a challenging thing to stand up to people and say that, that's what's occurring to you. So if they would like support, would like assistance, would like some advocacy, and you know that what's happening is discrimination, then that's your responsibility. You still don't just leave it there. Obviously, as you say, you go to your supervisor or your manager or HR. What should we do as well? Either before or after we speak to HR or your manager?
You mean like have evidence? Or?
We may not have any evidence.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things I would encourage you, or that people should think about. One is have a look at the grievance or the complaints or the anti-discrimination policy, so that you know the procedures of what should occur. The other thing I would recommend that you do is, and this is something that a little habit that I've tended to take up, because you don't want to write, because people used to say, "Oh, write yourself a note, keep your own file of what's happened." What I recommend is that you actually, if you've got email, so you email to yourself what occurred.
Yep.
So it's not taking it off-site. It's not breaching anyone's privacy and confidentiality. You haven't got a note at home that, you know, is uncontrolled. It's internal, but you've documented what occurred. You've documented that you spoke to a supervisor. You may also CC that supervisor. You've had this conversation, this is for my records. I'm just writing down. So I've just CC'd you. So this information's here. They've got it. You've got it. Because what happens if the manager takes it nowhere?
You have to have written notes or as you say, recorded notes somewhere.
Mm.
You don't know. I mean, it goes to Fair Work Australia, as someone said earlier. You could be called. If you're called, you've got to have something to refer to.
Yeah, yeah.
Time, date, place, etc.
Yeah, and the evidence that you sent it to your manager and they did nothing means that you've actually given it to your manager to put, and then they've not done their job. Or they've been part of the process and actively participated, which may be the case. So you would continue to go up in your organisation, the levels, until you reach whatever level that you could get. If you can't do anything there, then it's going outside of the organisation to the appropriate people. And sometimes that's not easy. It's a bit of research to work out who should I be going to. But as you say, ultimately, the Australian Human Rights Commission is actually a body there that you could go, look, this occurred, and they would either take it up or they would direct you to the most appropriate. So whether it's Fair Work Australia, Safe Work Australia, the Human Rights Commission itself. So there are lots of avenues, but we're not jumping there straight away. We do need to have the internal processes happen. And what's the other thing that we need to also do as part of this process? If you're supporting a client or a co-worker, you've made the report, it's off being managed or not managed. What are we coming back to? What are we doing?
Making sure they're okay.
Making sure they're okay. Following up. Following up, is it still happening? Did someone come to you? Did someone talk to you? Has this changed? We're not going, job done. I don't need to follow up anymore. We need to come back and check this. Yeah. All right. So again, when you look at diversity, then you look at discrimination. So wherever there's diversity, that may be discriminated against. And obviously we have our anti-discrimination laws. And your policies internally in an organisation will actually refer to discrimination within the code of conduct, usually. Code of ethics, code of conduct. And you're signing off on that when you are employed. There's very few places where you walk in the door and you don't have a stack of paperwork and policy that you have to sign and say, yep, I agree to this code of conduct. I will work under these regulations and within this legislation. All right, sorry guys, just keep moving on. So then we have our breaches dealt through the legal system with our existing laws and also with the Human Rights Commission that we mentioned. All right. Quick video and then we will have our break. So let me. The comment about writing an email to yourself, something that I was always taught when I first started work was, oh, write yourself a note and keep your own log. But when you consider privacy and confidentiality, it's become much more of a bigger deal. And so writing something down and keeping pieces of paper with any kind of details or names is not something you really want to do. And you could be challenged, like people have been challenged about taking stuff off organisation premises, even when they've, like for Liz, I think there was a nurse that wanted to make a complaint, and the mere fact that she'd emailed her private email address details around clients or issues or something, she actually got into quite a lot of trouble from APRA. So since then, I've sort of been much more aware of the fact that you would speak to your supervisor. I strongly encourage people to then go back to their desk and email and say, as per our discussion, just keeping this for my records or our records, and CCing them. You CC yourself, CC them, so it sits in your inbox. Keep it in a file in your inbox. They've got it. One, it's record keeping, but two, the mere fact that you CC your manager means that they've got that and they have to act on that. They can't ignore it. Whereas they can, oh, that conversation didn't happen kind of thing. Oh, they didn't make it seem as bad as it was. Whereas if it's in an email, there's kind of nowhere to go with that. Yeah. No comments on the second video? All good? Easy. All right, we will have a break here. Come back in 10 minutes. Dwayne, what I normally do now is I will turn off my camera and my mic and just go away for 10 minutes. Sometimes people will come back on and you can see that they want to do something. I don't know if you've noticed, I've had a few like direct messages in the chat to me as we've been going on. So you kind of got to keep your eye on the chat as well. Also, if people are if people are entering it in the chat and having long conversations, you want to keep an eye on what information's being shared and just close that down if you need to. Yeah. Very rarely do I need to. Often it's really actually quite good. They're very helpful. If you say, you know, I need this or research that, sometimes people will put links in there for you. I don't do the researching myself. I let them do it. It's about them learning, not me. Sometimes I had no answer for the that community services. Like I hadn't looked it up prior because this was a pre-prepared PowerPoint. I just run with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have not looked at the next unit PowerPoint. Did you want to do them solely on your own, or do you want me to do the first one and send it to you? This is the one you said you haven't seen anything.
I couldn't find it. I need to see Vicky really and see if I'm logging into Accelerate right. If that's where it's all meant to be, that is.
Okay. All right. We already talked a little bit about the rights and responsibilities of workers, employers, and clients. Any other comments to what you see on the screen? Is there any other points that you think we would need to think about? This isn't a perfect system, obviously. We always hear on the news about things going wrong and legislation or people going to Safe Work Practice or Fair Work Australia. So we need the systems because obviously there are issues. It doesn't prevent them, but there are mechanisms to remedy them. All right, now I'm going to get you to have a bit of a look at this case study because this actually is a little bit of an assessment that I noticed. I've marked for, I'm thinking it's this unit. Has anyone done the quiz or the case study for this unit yet? So you'll find this one. So you've got a worker who is planning on bringing his partner Ryan to a work dinner event. The manager pulls Ryan aside and tells him it is not appropriate to bring his male partner as it might impact the reputation and overall look of the company to stakeholders. So what legislation are we breaching here?
Discrimination.
Yeah.
What's that other one?
Human rights.
Yeah. Is there can anyone actually find me the name of the legislation or the act
Oh, yeah.
name?
Yep. Is it the sex discrimination?
The Anti-Discrimination Act 2004.
Yeah, perfect. And so what action should he take? Well, there's a mistake in that, isn't it? It doesn't read right. Anyway, so the worker, what action should he be taking?
The Australian Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, he may go there.
Fair Work Act, Anti-Discrimination Act, etc.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So we've got something that definitely needs to be managed. What could be the consequence of, like, what might the worker be feeling, or what could be the consequence in the workplace?
The threat of losing his job.
Yeah.
Or getting treated differently afterwards.
Yeah, so he might actually be feeling like he's being isolated and excluded. So it's very easy and quick to throw around terms like bullying and harassment. We need to be very clear on what is actually happening, and make sure that we're aware of the avenues that people can take. So in your assessment, there's a few questions running along this case study. So it's about working through that one. All right, so we're also looking at effective communication strategies and promoting diversity in the workplace. In communication, the unit, there is a little bit of information around senders and receivers, messages, channels, noise. So what interferes with the message. So you probably already have done that a little bit. I'm not going to go over that too much. But what are some of the barriers when you think about diversity? What are the challenges when you have to consider the impact of diversity with clients and colleagues? Has anyone used an interpreter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we talked about that when we did.
GBTIQ.
So
You've got the issue of
interpreters-
conflicting opinions in the workplace too.
Yeah,
you're going to have some people that would, in that scenario you just had a minute ago, that would support the manager because they're also in breach, obviously.
Yeah.
But I know it's a weird concept, but it's still a case of the thought police. You can't discriminate against anyone for any reason, and you also can't, as I said before, they can't be advantaged because of their culture either.
And we need to be mindful, don't we, that, you know, unless it's breaching legislation or unless it's behaviour or actions that would cause harm to themselves or to others, really, people have every right to their own beliefs and the way they live, all of that, their participation in community is all. There should be no reason why it's an issue in the workplace. And we need to think about how we can support people to have a workplace that is culturally safe. That if there are communication issues because of diversity, work out how we can actually support people. So using interpreters we talked about, and what is the important point when we use interpreters? When must we use interpreters? Yeah.
Yeah, when they can't speak the language, when they can't speak English and you can't understand them.
Yeah, that's a must.
Assume.
Yeah.
And they have to
What
be
about
qualified.
if they've got a friendly husband?
No, they have to be qualified. That was the second part to my question, was that they have to be certified, qualified.
Yeah, perfect. And that's the thing, like it is very easy, time-wise, ease of doing a consult, all of that kind of stuff. When people say, oh, I've got my husband here, he can talk for me, or he can tell me. And we have to be really mindful that is not appropriate, and we need to follow the policy with that.
It's pretty obvious it would be, they would be impartial, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be impartial, sorry, there'd be bias.
Yeah, they'd be biased. You have no idea whether they're actually giving all of the information. You have no idea if they actually understand the information that you're giving them and translating it correctly. It is a very important point, and like honestly, it is so easy to slip into the trap of using family member for just that quick interpretation. So we need to be really clear where we can and those situations where we must use an interpreter. And they're the situations that if you do it wrong and something goes wrong, it goes pear-shaped. All right. Didn't do that. Okay. Again, this is similar to that, like sender, receiver, channel, noise kind of concept, where we're looking at those barriers or those helpful aspects of communication. So where we've got some of those barriers externally, distance could also mean disconnect, where the messaging is just not happening. Health, it's a clear one. We're trying to speak to people, and if they're unwell, if they are intoxicated, if they have mental health problems, our messages just aren't going to be clear. They're not going to be received, and we need to double back and check when they are in a position to understand if we're sending or needing messages to be understood. Internally, we're talking also about external to organisation and internal to organisation. So we've got the setting or the occasion, as well as the internal beliefs around what might be happening or their understanding. So whether it's about health literacy, mental health literacy, drug and alcohol information, their thoughts about who should be giving them the information. So I actually had in my training today, the lecturer said she had people in her class tell her that she was too young to be giving this information, and they just weren't listening. So sometimes age and gender is that barrier. And then the differences within language and the meanings. So the way things are said, the concepts in other languages may not match up, so that it becomes a really challenging space to try and ensure that that messaging is heard and that it's correct for what you're trying to intend. Any comment on that? Any other barriers that you think are more likely in the community setting space? Yeah, Paul?
Homelessness.
Yes.
Just the external point of view is people and their consideration for that person that's a homeless person and the state of them, given that their lack of need, their needs being met with being housing, clothing, food, medical, etc., and just personal opinions on it. We do judge a book by its cover a bit.
We do. We absolutely do. And throwing in the local cost of living crisis type thing with the increased number of people that actually don't have a home, that are living in alternate accommodation, couch surfing, living in cars, living in camps, things like that. Like, I actually wonder how much of a difference that's made, because you are hearing in the news about people that have jobs, have kids, have jobs, and it's just through sheer bad luck, their rentals become unavailable and they can't find anything else, and now they're homeless. That perception in society and in organisations, I wonder if that realisation is these people are not awful, not at fault, not the cause of all the issues, whereas that judgment previously might have been there for people that were homeless. What else might you see in the community services space that is a barrier to communication?
Gender.
Yeah. Gender and age, it does become an issue sometimes. And sometimes we just have to match up our client and our workers, because we need effective relationships. We need effective, engaged relationships with our clients. And if that's a barrier, you're doing nobody any favors by trying to make that work. Yeah. And it goes the same with a cultural need. So if someone needs a specific culture to support them, then if you have the capacity, it's always best to be able to try and do that. You had a comment, Pierre?
Do you ever get like people that you might even know, like conflict of interest?
Oh, good point. So what are we doing there?
Normally you run away. But I know you. Bye.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't see them. Obviously.
But how do you have that conversation?
Or with the client, for example,
Yeah.
you just basically just how I'd say it is, unfortunately, your conflict of interest in legal terms. I can find you someone, for example, or that could help you, but I can't help you, unfortunately. Wouldn't
But
you have a conversation?
Pierre, like you know me, Pierre. You know we've been mates for so long. I don't want to see anyone else. You're a good mate, and I can talk to you.
Yeah, but legally, I don't think we're allowed to. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. You can't, and you will get that. Even in big cities, surprisingly, you'll front up, and there'll be somebody that you know. So it's not relegated to small places.
It might be
Yeah.
half my mates that used to live in Clayton, for example.
Yeah,
So,
it is. And yeah, Paul, very gently. We need to be clear when we're talking to people that we know, that I'd really like to help, but it's in our policy and it's just not something that we can do. But you know what? My mate Phil, he's an excellent worker, and I've known him for years and I trust him, and I think he would be a really good match for you. So you vouch for your co-workers.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And that'd be from experience too.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I've had relatives, like not me, but I had a Aboriginal health liaison working on a home visiting program with me, and her sister had a baby. And she came out for the home visit, and I'm like, I don't think this should be happening. And management didn't have a problem with it. I had a massive problem with it. So, sometimes our systems that should be in place, that are in place, aren't monitored and managed effectively. And it's up to you to speak up. It is up to you to disclose. So you go to your manager and you have that conversation. You've had that too, Phil?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
Mm. Yeah, it's a challenge. And sometimes I don't understand personally why they don't see it's an issue. But management can sometimes just let it go. And I'm like, oh, you're really leaving yourself open, I think. We need to think about this. But yeah, put it out there, put it on record. You've said it.
Is it something you think has changed over the years?
What, that they're letting that through?
No, that in the past it wouldn't have been a problem.
Oh, yes,
and
absolutely.
Today it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We definitely have more of awareness. Like just these, if you looked at the dates of some of these codes of practice with organisations and things like that, they're fairly new. So this kind of thinking is fairly new. And when I say that, I don't mean in the last 2 years, but it's certainly over the last 30 years of me working in health, that kind of ethical thinking and being spelt out is much more clear.
Sorry, that's my dog.
All right, so non-verbal communication. Who thinks they're really good at keeping their rolling eyes internal?
What do you mean by that?
Well, my husband always says, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." So some of us do not have a poker face. And that mental rolling of eyes is not just mental, it's actually physical. So we need to remember that our nonverbal language is more than 50% of our communication, but it's not just our body language. It's also about when you look at the vocal tones, our pitch and our accent going up and down and the pace. Yeah, Liz?
I was just going to say, yesterday we had a new resident come in. She's 83. And normally I ask, have you used your bowels? But sometimes, because when they're cognitively impaired, I said, I just did it simple. And I said, have you done a poo today, right? And she goes, can you not speak to me like a child? You're asking, she's a former nurse as well. And yep. I said, well, have you used your bowels this afternoon then? I said to her, like, normally I say that, but when they're cognitively, it's just easier to say poo. But she said I was talking to her like a child, like, yeah, didn't even realise it.
Yeah, so our choice of words can matter. And you can make assumptions about the language that you think you need to pitch to a person. So, you know how, like, again, you don't talk down to people, don't use too complicated language. So we want to hit the right spot. Sometimes we don't get it right, and it can be hard. And we do make assumptions. Going back to your comment, Paul, we make assumptions about people that are homeless. They may have jobs and be fully functioning, but, you know, yeah, Phil?
Do we have to, how do we learn that? Because that is so crucial, that poker face.
Yeah.
I suppose it's just practice. Like, what do you do? I mean,
honestly,
it's hard not to react, right?
It is hard not to react. And one of the things, like, you know, we do it to death. We do communication, we do diversity. Every unit you do, we say, let's do this again. Let's self-reflect. Let's think about our judgments. Let's think about our attitudes. Let's think about our biases. The more we actually do that, the more we unpack some of that unconscious bias we have, the less we actually get of that on our face. So we have that opportunity to go, you know, everybody's different. We all live differently. This is not, you know, the more you hear stories, the less things will shock you. So the more you'll be able to not react. That's not always a good thing, because it means you're hearing lots of stories. It is going in and taking a breath. And, you know, someone starts to talk to you about things, and you actually just have to unclench. You have to take a deep breath, stop thinking with your forebrain, the front of your mind. You want to just, actually, no, stop thinking with the back, your limbic system that's going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and start thinking with the front of your brain and go, okay, just let me listen to this. Let me get all of the information. And you like that. I'll just use my strategies. I'll just actively listen. And by doing that consciously, it stops you from doing the nonverbal as much.
Mm.
You had a point before that, Paul?
No, if Phil doesn't mind, I've just had a point to raise in relation to what he said. Like, how do you learn that? Mate, in 30 years, I was learning it still to the very last day, but I worked as a detective and detective sergeant and senior sergeant in the sex offence unit for in the western suburbs, and I don't hate anyone. there were some people I don't like very much. Many of them were child tamperers, unfortunately, for want of a better word, child sex offenders against children, not at that age. But you just have to, and you do. You've just got to sit on one side of the desk, turn the tapes on and start questioning them. And I don't know in this industry how that will play out, but I do know in the police force dealing with sex offenders and family violence matters particularly, it's a trophy. They like to talk, and they like to tell you about themselves and what they've done, but they like to tell you their version, not your version. So it was easy to sit there with a poker face for that, whereas dealing with armed robbers and those, was never an issue, because most of them as you know, nowadays we don't have bank armed robberies because of the security type of things and also the lack of cash. But we used to have bank armed robberies weekly in the 80s, and sitting opposite them, I didn't need to be a nice guy. They weren't going to tell me anything anyway. Most of them were career criminals. So you never stop learning it, I don't think.
Yeah, and it is a very good point that that reflection, that developing your skills, it's continual. You refine it all the time. You'll come out of a session thinking, oh, why didn't that work? Why didn't that work? And maybe it was about your communication or your body language or something else. You are going to hear stories. You're going to hear things that are difficult to hear. And you have to come back to why are people here? Why are they seeking help? And you're there to assist them find that help. And that helps you move past some of that. Yeah, if that makes a little bit of sense. We'll just point out the visual as well, the nonverbal communication, not just from their side, but from your side. So there is a reason why there are uniform policies. So most of your community services workplaces, you aren't expected to wear a uniform. Why would that be?
Because you look like an authority figure, maybe?
Yeah, it's about that dynamic, about I'm a worker, but I'm not this official authoritarian who's going to tell you what to do. It's about making people comfortable being at the level that they're at. So your dress, your physical appearance actually does make a difference. You have to think about it, not in a massive way, but you do have to think about it, how you present yourself to people. So, if you're too casual and you're swearing and all the rest of it, then what kind of professional confidence do you instill? Now, I'm not saying you can't swear, because I swear, but we think about where and how and what. So, if you've got a hardcore group of participants in something, being really prim and proper may not cut it with that group. But we don't want to go down to the lowest point of where people are at either, with the swearing or with the sloppy dress, or, do you know what I mean? So it's just a point I need you to think about when you're working, if that makes sense.
I think it goes to another extent too, if you don't mind, but everyone would remember, well, not everyone, some of you will remember, the 80s were a big thing for men in suits with ties. The Mickey Mouse tie, the Donald Duck tie, we all had these cartoon ridiculous ties that we used to wear. And I've been chipped in the Supreme Court over wearing a childish Mickey Mouse tie while interviewing a pedophile. Now, it never occurred to me through the committal hearing, through the trial, and now it was only at the appeal that the barrister for the opposition jumped up and said, "Why'd you wear a child's tie?"
Mm,
So
mm.
you've got to take everything into account, I suppose.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and yeah, that's a direction I hadn't thought of. But absolutely. So what you wear, how you wear it, matters. Your visual impression matters. Your tone matters. The words you actually say. It all makes a difference into how that relationship develops. So we need to think about that. All right, let me just. Okay. All right. So, too quick. Hold on. So to work effectively in community services, where a significant part of our work involves interacting with other people and with people from diverse cultures and backgrounds, it's important to understand the non-verbal messages that other people send us, as well as the non-verbal messages we send to other people. So when we're thinking non-verbal and culture, ways of communicating, what are some of the first ideas that come to mind? Yeah, Phil?
I would imagine that, well, I mean, the assessment I'm doing at the moment would be the role play about not shaking hands with a Muslim woman, not touching people.
Yeah.
How you sit, your posture, you know, the crossed arms. But I don't know a lot about it. Paul probably knows more about it than I do. But yeah, I think just those basic things, shaking hands.
So they're the
Maybe
kind of
learning-
easy ones, aren't they? Like Muslim women, we don't touch and shake hands. Even females, female to female, they don't. An Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you know, we're aware that direct eye contact is not something that is preferred. And I don't know that that's not for everybody, but you know, that's a concept that we need to keep in mind. I know that when, and I don't know all cultures, but so there's a stereotype and a generalization, that some Asian cultures, when they hand over money or paper, they give it with both hands. So there's a few bits and pieces that people might know. What do we do when we have somebody that we're working with? What's the best thing to do?
Get to know them very quickly.
Get to know them quickly and ask them. Yeah.
You've also got people with OCD and germaphobes and things. They don't want to shake hands.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it comes back to that self-reflection bit of an observation. Like, can you tell very easily amongst your friends and colleagues who is not a toucher, who's not a hugger?
Yeah.
If you find it fairly easy to identify those people fairly quickly, then what you'll find is your ability to observe your client and go with what they need will actually develop quite quickly. Those people that are oblivious and go around hugging you and kissing you goodbye and hello when you're not a hugger and you have a personal bubble, don't get it. One, they're very irritating because I have my bubble and you're in it. But it's, you know, they don't find that easy. They don't understand it. They don't see the nuances of that. And those people, if you have them in your community services space, are the people that will often have challenging clients, difficult to engage, just don't gel. The reason? They're not picking up the cues. They're putting constraints in the place of communication, and it makes it difficult. If you think about your workplaces now or previously, would you be able to identify people that seem to rub people the wrong way because they weren't observant? So looking at the slide, so we've talked about it, you know, being aware of our communication and matching what the client needs includes thinking about that diversity, being mindful of your language. So like Liz mentioned earlier, you know, sometimes terms, while they might seem generic or innocuous to you, aren't to someone else. So it is about just being aware and just apologizing if you get it wrong, really. Yeah. We won't do that. So when you resolve conflict, all of us have had varying experience of conflict situations in the workplace. Some have been resolved quite satisfactorily, some you would say have not been. What would you say is the most effective workplace resolution? What works well?
Chain of command.
Yeah. So having a good kind of idea of whose role and having that hierarchy.
Yep.
Yeah.
You mean like communication or?
Yeah, just anything like what, you know, if you've been involved in conflict in the workplace, what's been something that's really worked, do you think, or what works effectively?
Creative rostering.
Yeah, that is definitely a creative solution. And sometimes that's the only thing that will work. We need to separate people because it's just not going to be resolved.
Yeah.
And unless you're going to actually move someone out, you have to find a resolution, don't you?
Mm.
Yeah, so there may be a whole range of things that might need to happen, but the biggest issue, the important thing is that we just don't ignore it, that there is some kind of action taken, because what happens if we ignore that conflict?
It festers.
It'll reoccur.
It reoccurs, it festers, it infiltrates to the rest of the team.
Mm.
And that whole dynamic changes, doesn't it?
Have
People
gossip
start,
issues around the,
yeah,
you know, have people talking about people in the office and people playing on both sides of the fence. It's, you know, working from a business or an organisation with 16,000 members, it's bizarre the gossip that we'll get from Dandenong to St Kilda inside one shift.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And shouldn't even happen, shouldn't even leave that one area.
It shouldn't, but unfortunately that's human nature.
Mm.
It simply does. And
Yeah.
it's a shame because people need to talk. And if they don't think they're being heard, they'll talk to one of their friends.
And so you can see that taking action is absolutely vital to prevent that deterioration of the culture and the way. What are some of the things that happen as a result of that kind of culture and language and communication and conflict in a workplace? What do you see start to happen?
Education.
Yep. So education to get on top of it, because some of the negative things that are happening would be absenteeism. You'd have resignations. You'd have people just refusing to work or not be same space, or refusing workloads because they've had enough and they're doing this bare minimum. So we need to get on top of it. So education is definitely one of those things. Some of that creative kind of shifting people around can start to break up some of those little cliques that can't kind of form. So it's definitely that kind of process. People need to be mindful of how we can deal with it.
How does, I'm only asking because of this situation, In the industry, how does hot desking work?
Hot desking is a pain.
Yeah, I was lucky. I mean, the last 16 years of my career, I was a sergeant or a senior sergeant, etc. So I had basically my own office space, or at least my own desk and crew space. But hot desking must be a nightmare, because if you've got someone who is particularly fussy and clean and neat, and the afternoon shift come on and you come back in the next morning and there's coffee stains on your desk and your computer's a nightmare and your bin's full, and it creates angst.
Yeah, it can definitely. Like I said, it's a pain. I don't like it. I hot desk when I'm not in my main office, and so I'm very mindful that I clean my mess up. Mind you, I'm only taking laptop and minimal paper stuff. So if you hot desk like that, you tend not to have lots of bits of paper with you. But if you're constantly hot desking in the same location, that's where that definitely causes angst. And I have stuff. I like hard copy stuff, and a lot of people do. So when you're a hot desker, you can't have it.
No.
So yeah, it does create tension.
Sorry, it was just a curiosity in this industry.
Not every industry, like most of these community service industries, like I just mentioned. So I work in an office space for my other job, and I have my own desk, but I travel around and I'll go from Ballina to Newcastle. And when I'm in one of those offices, obviously I'm hot desking. So there's always a hot desk available, and multiple people might be sharing it. So that's a very different situation to you walking in every day and having to hot desk. And that's not typical in this space. If you are in a location, if you do have a space, you usually have a specific desk. Dwayne, would you say the same thing for your experience working in?
Yeah, it's like it's funny how you think of hot desking as a key thing, that it's going to bring up some issues. But even open plan office now, like I think that's caused, well, that's part of it as well, actually. Hot desk and open plan offices with, you can't have a private conversation and you can't have a private telephone call with a client or something like that. It's just opened things up, and apparently open plan offices are better for everybody's mental health. The studies have shown. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. The vast majority are open plan, so that's what you will head into. And when you think about the kind of open plan, is what you'll be heading into, the vast majority. And the vast majority of phone calls that you'll take will be private and confidential. And your co-workers who aren't involved in that care don't need to hear those conversations. So then you have to find rooms or phones, if you're using a landline, where you can have private and confidential conversations. So that's another bit of shift in your workload of, like, I've got to make sure I've got to go out and have this conversation over here, and then I'll come back to my computer here. So it does take a bit of thinking through that process. It's not
when you've got like an open plan and a hot desking situation, sometimes you've got rooms specifically, like conference, or not conference, but
Interview rooms.
Private rooms where you can book them out so that you can have a private meeting or a client meeting. But then you get some people book them out, book that room, and that is massive conflict, trying to consult a certain member of staff, that you can't do that. They're for everybody, and you've got no right to just book that room for the whole day.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed what you said before, Dwayne. Did you say it was beneficial or not beneficial?
The open
Which
plan.
one? Sorry.
In relation to the hot desking, you said the studies had shown
So Google apparently started it off and said that it's better for everybody's mental health. And loads of other companies started copying, saying this is really good for everybody. But practically, it seems like not many people like it.
So there's
I
the
hate it.
extremes of hot desking, and there's just open plan with hot desk space. So there'll be a bit of variety. And as Dwayne said, usually there is a rooms that you can book for client conversations. And if you needed to, you could duck into them if they're not in use. But that's where the conflict happens, because people want the room and they chuck you out, or you've got those people that block book it and you can't get access. So there's that's the conflict in the workplace that you will definitely need to manage, because that happens. Yeah. All right. So age, sorry, I'm just going mindful of time, so I just want to keep moving on. Age, disability, and gender. We've already spoken about diversity and the impact on communication there. We've already had a bit of a chat about cultural differences and the impact, or not the impact, the need to be mindful when we're having conversations with people. And I won't play this video because then we will run over time. But this video is quite a good little one. I think it's Australian based. It's just workers talking about things to be mindful of when you're working with people from a CALD background. So it's an interesting little one. Like Phil mentioned before, when we talk about working with people, it's a little bit like common sense. When we communicate, you know, we would be showing respect to everybody. We would be non-judgmental. We would be asking to clarify or asking for their preferences on how they communicate. We would be observant for their style of communication. And cultural interpreters, I actually, like when I mentioned my my previous role working as a home visitor in health, and I had the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander liaison, you would say they're a cultural interpreter. We also had multicultural people. So I was in southwestern Sydney and we had a Chinese Mandarin speaking liaison and also a Arabic speaking liaison. So not considered an interpreter, but more as a worker from a background that culturally would assist when we were working with that client. So just be aware that though they speak the language, they're not an accredited interpreter. If you have somebody that typically the title is like liaison that they use rather than interpreter. Dwayne, have you worked in a service that has had somebody in that kind of role? I know health has it all over the place, but I just...
We did, but not very often. It's like has been mentioned, it's difficult to pick out and say, yeah, but they're not actually qualified to represent our dialogue here.
Yeah.
Whether it's a like a mum and a young bloke that can't really speak English, or coming into rehab, it's not working. So
yeah. So we would find, sorry, I was just going to say, we would find sometimes they would be a barrier, the liaison. They could be really helpful, but when you're trying to develop a relationship and they can't interpret, it's just another person sometimes that kind of creates a bit of distance in the relationship that you're trying to build. Mm. So they can be
And
helpful,
then
but
trying to get somebody last minute, you often find that you can't get somebody that's accredited or somebody that's qualified. So you're opting for the best of bad solutions.
yeah. Yeah. So if they're not an official role and employed by your organisation, it's not so simple.
Is there a cultural liaison telephone service, same as we have with interpreters?
I actually don't know, Paul. I wonder if there is. Let me just quickly.
The police force has
Yeah.
Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander liaison. We have gay and lesbian liaison. We have transgender liaison. If there's a culture in your community, there will be a liaison officer available. But I know I've used the telephone interpreter service thousands of times over my career, but I don't know about cultural.
I think it depends. I couldn't find an actual. The main one that popped was actually all the police. The next one that popped was job ads for liaisons, and there's quite a lot of ads for liaisons for different like colleges and organizations and things like that. So there's definitely it's identified roles within an organization. So I don't think there's like a group like the interpreters that you could ring. Which is interesting. Yeah. Oh, if anyone finds one, let us know. But yeah, I don't think so.
There's a cultural liaison workers department.
Mm.
It seems to be under the education department.
Yeah, so employed by the Department of Ed.
Yeah, so it's the same as what we were talking about with the police. Yeah.
So no kind of group to ring up and provide that support if you needed to.
I've got dozens of them here, but none of them say that they're a telephone support service.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. Yes, there is.
Yeah.
There's an Aboriginal cultural liaison telephone service.
Oh, there you go.
So there's an Aboriginal in IQ, Torres Strait Islander.
Yeah.
There's nothing in relation to gender or other cultures, but it does. There's definitely an Aboriginal cultural liaison telephone service.
Oh, well, that's good to know. All right, well, we're on to the last slide. This is the one where I wanted to talk about the assessment. So shame everybody's gone. So just as a refresher, Pierre, maybe you've not headed into your assessments just yet. So the assessment task 1 is usually a quiz. Some of them are long, some of them are short. It's just typically questions. So short answer questions, there might be multiple choice questions, just a bit of a variety there, but mostly just short answer questions, yeah? And then task 2 for this one is a research report. So you're going to do a little bit of research into the different groups in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, and the impact on diversity on life and work in Australia. So when you look at your assessment and you start writing in, when it says research report, it means that you need to give me a little bit more than a short answer. You can break it into the 3 sections of what you're talking about. Usually when you start writing in the text box, it just expands. But I believe there may be a word limit because I did mark someone's different class and it said between 800 and 1,200 words, but they got to kind of 800 and it wouldn't let them enter anymore. So I'm not saying exactly what it is. I might depend on the assessment, but so roughly 800 is probably what you're looking at. Then you've got your role play. So this is actually saying observed by their assessor communicating with people from diverse social and cultural backgrounds in a simulated work environment. Now, your instructions will say, if it has to be observed by me in real time, that will be part of the instructions for that assessment. And I don't actually know if this one is, I think this one is, like there's 3 other people in the role play. So that one, actually I've probably got the screen share. Just let me get that one out. I think I've got it.
What's the assessment like the code?
Sorry, what was that?
So what code is that assessment?
So this
hang on a minute.
is the CHCDIV001. So this is task 3. So you can see there's a few participants in this role play. So this one, I did put in the chat that Vicky is actually doing this role play. Like she's got a booking open for this Friday. So if you're ready to do this role play and interested, you could email Vicky, or I could email Vicky and let her know that you're interested in doing that role play if she still has space.
At what time is she doing it, do you know?
What did I say? I think I said it's right at the beginning. Disappears. There you go. No, there it is. 3:25 to 4:30 on Friday.
Yeah.
And she wants who?
I wouldn't even be.
Sorry, what was that, Paul?
Who does she,
wouldn't be
what
home
role
by
is she looking
then.
for to have played?
Oh, I think,
Is she looking for students?
yeah, I think she's looking for students. So if you're,
Put me in there if you want.
yeah, I'll let her know that you're free and interested in doing it. So what
Yep.
she says is just to be ready. So have a look at the role play, look at the instructions, and if there's pre-templates or bits, either pre-started or have your head around what you need to do for it.
I'll do task 1 and 2 first and see what she's up to by the time I get to 3.
Yep. Yeah, they're separate, task 1 and 2. So if you're wanting to do this Friday, you don't have to have done all of that first. So that'll work for that one. So this one's just yeah, what are we doing? Oh, there's 2 workers and there's a bit of an argument and conflict, and you've got to work through that.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be home in time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. Well, I'll just let her know that Paul's would be able to do it if she's still got space.
Mm.
And she'll send you that link then if she's, yeah.
Yeah,
So
cool.
there's 3
Well, if
things.
she hasn't, if she's already filled it, that's fine. But it's just if she needs someone, I'd like to
Yeah,
get another
because
one out the
it's a
door.
good one to get done and dusted if you are up to it. Oh, and then oops, let me go back. And then go back. Then the task 4 for this one is a reflective journal. So again, oh geez, that's sensitive tonight. So it will be asking you to just reflect on your own culture and cultural competence in the workplace. So not every unit has 4 tasks, Pierre. Some will have more,
Yep.
some will have less. So some will have more role plays. It just depends on the unit. And then we strongly encourage you to do all of the assessments for each unit before you move on to your next one. Any questions about that?